The 2010s were a very tumultuous time for Studio Gainax. Prominent works would come out from them during this time, but it was over the course of the 2010s where the company would suffer massive blows to reputation. Lawsuit after lawsuit would plague the company, and incorrect business decisions would also play a major factor in this as well, and it was around 2012 where these poor decisions would rear its ugly head. In the prior video, I talked about Hideaki Anno leaving Gainax to form his own company, Studio Kara. Anno had made a deal with Gainax that Gainax would retain the rights to the merch sales, but Anno would get royalties on projects he was directly involved in. Anno believed this to be in both of their best interests, until it wasn't. After this deal was struck, Gainax would earn less money from the Evangelion title, but in 2012, Gainax stopped paying back Kara entirely for the money that was owed to them. The Gainax and Kara saga would obviously not end there. In 2014, Gainax begged Kara for a loan of 100 million yen, saying that if they did not receive the money in 3 days, they would go under. Because it was Anno's old friend Yasuhiro Takeda asking for the money, Anno agreed to pay up, but as a condition, Gainax would have to transfer the rights to handling the merchandise and royalties to Kara 1 year earlier than originally planned. Other than that, Anno wrote that there was no interest or other conditions on the loan. Anno was someone that had personal ties to the company. After all, he was one of the founders of it, so this next move displayed by Gainax would be a slap in the face to him on everything he stood for. Not only did Gainax not pay back the loan, they also sold the rights for Gunbuster, Diebuster, and Fooly Cooly, 3 works that Kara staff had been heavily involved in, without telling anyone at Kara. Anno wrote that he had only ever received the royalties he was due for Evangelion, and that to this day he has not received the royalties he is owed for Gunbuster and Nadia, among other works. Now keep this in mind, as Gainax was doing this, Anno was completely out of the loop. He has no idea of what's going on at this current juncture. These are all works that he's directly tied to, and they're being sold off without his consent. Money that's supposed to be in his company's pockets are now in somewhere else, unbeknownst to anyone. Of course, Anno would eventually find out about these dealings happening. He had to retaliate. Anno would state that, "I could have shrugged off the loan that never got repaid, but we were anxious to preserve the production materials we had poured blood, sweat, and tears into." In 2016, Kara sued Gainax for 100 million yen and won the case in 2017. During the case, Gainax wouldn't appeal the case, and a formal apology was issued by Hiroyuki Yamaga. He'd apologized for everyone involved with the trial and to the companies associated with the trial. However, he did mention that Gainax would be restructuring and returning to the former glory that made Gainax into the company it was at the time. Gainax over their tenure would always incur these massive debts through one way or another. Mismanagement always seems to be a key factor here when it came down to business decisions. In a document by Gainax themselves on the details of the bankruptcy, which we will come back to soon, states that since 2012, our financial situation has worsened due to poor forecast and restaurant management. The establishment of an unplanned CG company, large unsecured loans to individual executives, and the failure to win investment contracts, which has resulted in the management and executives privatizing the company. Due to the large amount of debt created by the executives, we fell into a difficult situation, such as being expelled from the committee for non-payments of royalties and being sued for debts. Hideaki Anno was a person who was very wary of the way Gainax was being handled prior to his exit. He'd often give his piece on how to manage certain things better, but no one would be receptive to his criticisms of the company. It wouldn't stop there either. In 2011, Hiroyuki Amaishi and Masahiko Otsuka would exit the company as well and would form Studio Trigger. Hiroyuki Amaishi and Masahiko Otsuka 1 year prior would work on Panty and Stocking, a project they both held very dear to them as they were working on it, and even after production was finished. Panty and Stocking was a home run with audiences establishing itself a niche within the Western sphere, but Gainax just held onto the project with no plans to continue it. Panty and Stocking was even confirmed to have a season 2 at the end of the season 1 credits, but it would never come to be, but we'll get to that a bit later. To dial back the clock a little bit here, we're going to go back to the production of Nadia, and there's a man I have to bring up, and his name is Hiroaki Inoue. Inoue served as a producer for Gainax and was one of the founders of the company, but he would actually have a falling out with the company as to why he would exit it soon after. Okada and Inoue weren't on the best of terms. The two were actually vying for the top spot of being leader of the company during the time, but Okada would actually give the spot to Sawamura instead, a move that caught people within the company off guard. There were talks within the company with employees thinking this was a ploy by Okada to try and hone in on the power of the company, but Yasuhiro Takeda disagreed with that notion. As meetings were underway for the production of Nadia at the time, Inoue is pursuing his own projects. Yasuhiro Takeda would speak on this and say, Inoue viewed this as an opportunity to strike off on his own. He decided to bypass Okada, whom he no longer considered trustworthy, and had Sadamoto and Maeda secretly work on the settings, character design, storyboards, and so forth. NHK already went through with the pitch and accepted working on Nadia, but Takeda wasn't going to take this lying down. He stated that, Okada, Sawamura, and myself attended the Nadia production meeting at NHK. In no uncertain terms, we demanded that either Inoue step down from the project or Gainax would withdraw. There was a producer from Toho in attendance, and I wouldn't be surprised if he bears a grudge against us to this day. They had already filled the director's position, but he said something like, "This isn't at all what we talked about in our first meeting," and promptly dropped out of the project. Anno would later be chosen as his replacement, and the rest of the staff as well as NHK and Toho sided with Gainax rather than Inoue. In one fell swoop, Inoue had left the project and quit his position at Gainax. For as successful as Nadia would be, it would have never-ending stories of production woes as it was being developed, a power struggle on top of other animators working on the project that no one knew about, to being 80 million yen in debt after the series. This would tie into Gainax's other issues and how they would arise. Which leads me to Tomohiro Maki. Maki was the board director of Gainax in 2015, but was appointed as the representative director of Gainax in October of 2019. During the time of Maki's tenure with the company, Studio Gainax owned a condominium in Tokyo Adachi's ward, which the company called it the Production Women's Dormitory. The Production Women's Dormitory served as a place for young girls to enter the condo, and many were seen leaving it. Unfortunately, this would take an awful turn. The following topic does have to do with sexual assault, so if this topic disturbs you, I'll leave a timestamp in the video to when the discussion is over. Tomohiro Maki would also operate a production company where the purpose of it was to train young voice actors, and the teenager in this ordeal was in an exclusive contract with the company at the time. The unnamed victim said that Tomohiro Maki asked me to take dirty pictures so he could sell me as a voice actress. I didn't know how it all worked, but I was told that it was necessary for marketing, so I agreed to the filming and massage even though I didn't want to. Mainichi Shimbun reports that Maki would use the excuse such as the actress's feet were swollen and that he'd massage them as the cover-up for him to do such indecent acts. Police statements stated that Maki engaged in obscene acts with the woman on 4 separate occasions between February 6th and the 23rd, and all of these would take place in that same condominium owned by the company. The victim would then make a formal complaint with the Tokyo Metropolitan Police. The victim would have another statement saying that there were times when I refused, but there were also times when I had no choice but to accept because I was led by his words. I think his act is a terrible and despicable act that exploits people's feelings. Tomohiro Maki denied the charges and claimed during the trial that the photos were necessary for business. Maki was then found guilty and sentenced to only 2 years and 6 months in jail. After his arrest, other studios distanced themselves from Gainax. Studios such as Yonago Gainax, Gainax Kyoto, Gaina, and Studio Kara all released statements distancing themselves from Gainax or any involvement in the proceedings at the time. Hideaki Anno would speak personally on the matter, stating that, "First and foremost, we would like to express our heartfelt condolences to those affected by this incident. Furthermore, I feel extremely disappointed that Gainax, a company which I helped to found, was involved in production for a long time and even served as a director at one point, has been reported in this manner." Anno, of course, would start off the op-ed by thanking the victim for bringing such an important matter to light like this. Following this ordeal, the entire board of directors were changed on December 27, 2019. Going back to Gainax's company statement, they would state that in order to resolve the confusion caused by the scandal of the former representative director, we revamped the management team in February 2020 with the kind support of Color Inc. Gainax, fresh off the revamp, it would seem that the company would be in a much better light due to everything changing internally, but that would not be the case because they would be back in debt yet again. While working with Color Inc., Gainax also made a statement on what transpired while working with them. Gainax stated that, "We discovered facts such as large amounts of borrowing from financial institutions, defaulting on debts to various companies in the animation industry, and selling and transferring intellectual property and production materials to companies without the permission of the legitimate rights holders, and we've begun to normalize these facts." The amount of secrecy and cover-ups within the company, it was no wonder they would eventually fall under. The company already operating under their means and then not paying back companies would garner more of a negative reception business-wise with Gainax. Gainax already was distanced from other studios, but to then borrow more funds with the intention of never paying it back further cemented this company's standing with others. And of course, this would mark the beginning of the end for Gainax. Credit research firm Tokyo Shoko Research estimates Gainax owes approximately 380 million yen, which equates to $2.4 million USD, to 71 creditors. This, on top of the massive debt they got in 2012, would be too much for the company to bear going forward. There was nothing more that Gainax could realistically do in this situation, but they would speak on this as well, stating that, "With the cooperation of Kara and the directors of the new system, we have began working with the cooperating companies to confirm the rights of the works, protect the rights of the writers and creators, and properly manage and operate the intellectual property and materials that are being scattered so that the main works can be operated in the future through each production committee. However, in addition to the situation where many of the former management remain shareholders, we have not been able to resolve the large amount of debt that had been accumulated under the previous system." And to pivot to this current year in May, Gainax was then sued by a debt collection company, and with everything that has happened thus far, they deemed it impossible to continue their business as it stood and filed for bankruptcy. Studio Kara would then be in charge of Gainax's trademark and the IP rights from the company and the full owners of the Evangelion IP. Shows like Panty and Stocking and Gurren Lagann, two series that were essentially held hostage by the company, is now fully owned by Studio Trigger, a fight that Hiroyuki Amaishi and the entirety of Trigger was over the moon to win so the series can have a future. Production IG owns the rights to Fooly Cooly, seeing as they were the ones producing the anime after Gainax, this decision would be the best decision they would make going forward. Even though Gainax went out the way that it did, we can't forget what the company was able to accomplish, a company comprised of anime fans and lovers of the medium getting the opportunity to make that very same content that they enjoy. A team of dreamers, a team that never took the conventional way out, a team that decided not to chase trends and to be able to produce what made themselves happy. Look at what was able to branch off from Gainax: Studio Gonzo, Studio Kara, and Studio Trigger, three prominent animation studios with great works attached to them, all stemmed from people that used to work at Gainax. Even though Gainax had all of these issues internally, the heart of what it stood for is being carried by Studio Trigger. Trigger is the studio that will be able to carry Gainax's legacy while forging a new one for themselves. Trigger is able to take what worked from Gainax and build upon it with the same business philosophy it once had. Studio Kara, with rights to Evangelion, which is now a billion-dollar IP, are able to maximize in this series with no strings attached and within the home of the original creator. Gainax was able to make so many different shows with dedicated fan bases. Fooly Cooly, Panty and Stocking, Nadia, Gunbuster, Madaka Box, the list goes on. So while it suffered the fate that it did, it would be well to remember their impact on the culture, to always be different, to always challenge what is normal, to be creative, to say this isn't conventional and that's okay. This is what Gainax was, the legacy that Gainax was able to leave behind. But what are the founders of Gainax doing now? Hideaki Anno, which we know as the founder of Studio Kara, he was able to make his final Evangelion film, which grossed over $92,246,218 at the box office worldwide and put it in the number 34 spot of highest grossing Japanese movies of all time. Hideaki Anno was also able to write and direct Shin Kamen Rider, which came out last year, which grossed over $16 million worldwide, making it the most commercially successful Kamen Rider movie. Toshio Okada runs a successful YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers where he goes over everything anime and otaku culture as a whole. Yoshiyuki Sadamino has worked on shows like Great Pretender, co-created the Dot Hack franchise, and has worked on the future Fooly Cooly series as a character designer. Hiroyuki Yamaga is still working on Uru and Blue, which was supposed to have come out a couple years ago, but no word on a current release date has been made. This was a project he tried to get made back in Gainax, but nothing came of it. Shinji Higuchi would direct Shin Ultraman, which released in 2022. He was nominated at the 46th Japan Academy Film Prize for Director of the Year for that movie in 2023. He would act in the 2024 film Brush of the God, and he is set to direct the remake of the 1975 film The Bullet Train, which is supposed to release on Netflix, but no date has been mentioned as of yet. Takami Akai would create Yonago Gainax in 2014, and a game he worked on called Princess Maker 2 would be re-released in 2024 titled Princess Maker 2 Regeneration. His company is operational to this day. As for Yasuhiro Takada, there's no word on what he's currently doing. All of the founders are still successful and are in different parts of their careers, and they've essentially left the groundwork for others to be inspired by them and to pick up the mantle. I mentioned Trigger, and they're paving the way forward with that. Studio Trigger has made the widely successful Cyberpunk Edgerunners, which won the Anime of the Year awards at the Crunchyroll Anime Awards. They made a special PV for the 40th anniversary of Transformers and are working on season 2 of Panty and Stocking. As much as Gainax has had a tumultuous time in the industry and there were a lot of not great moments within it, we can't forget what they have done to shape anime and the culture forever. There's a lot of positives that were birthed from Gainax, and it shows that no matter what, a silver lining can be had as long as you're willing to reach for it.